See how one rancher found hope amidst tragedy in the arms of a rescued creature. John Carter had been a rancher all his life. His father had been a rancher, and his father before him. The land, the animals, the open sky, it was all he knew. But times were changing, and so was the land he loved. The drought that had gripped the region for the last 2 years was the worst he'd ever seen. Long hours in the field, riding horses under the harsh sun, had always been part of John's life. Yet this felt different now. The cattle prices had plummeted, and fewer buyers were willing to pay the prices that would keep his business afloat. It was as though every time John thought things might improve, another setback knocked him back down. He didn't show it to anyone, but the truth was that John was losing hope. The weight of his financial struggles hung over him like the oppressive Texas heat. He had always fought to make a living off the land, but now it seemed like the land was fighting back, and it was winning. But still, John loved the land. He had a deep connection to it. Every crack in the earth, every gust of wind, every droplet of rain was a part of him. It was more than just a job to him. It was his life, his purpose, and his animals were part of that purpose. He would wake before the sun, make sure the cattle had enough water, check on the crops, and keep the fences intact. It was hard work, grueling work, but it was his life, and he'd never known any other way. His life, his livelihood, his identity, it was all tied to the ranch. Yet the weight of the world felt like it was pressing in on him every single day. But there was something about the bond he shared with the land and the animals that kept him going, even in the hardest of times. One morning, while John was out in the fields, the sound of a cow bellowing drew him to the corral. He walked slowly, his boots sinking into the dry earth. As he approached, he saw the problem. A cow, one of his most reliable breeders, had just given birth, but the calf was weak. It could barely stand, let alone walk. John's heart sank. He had seen his fair share of newborn calves, but this one was different. This little life was struggling, and no matter how hard he tried, John couldn't seem to help it. The calf's mother was licking it, trying to get it to stand, but the calf's legs buckled beneath it, and it collapsed back onto the ground. John stood there, helpless, for what felt like an eternity. The emotional toll was immediate. It wasn't just the loss of the calf. It was the realization that life on the ranch was becoming harder with every passing day. His dreams, his hard work, his connection to the land, they were all slipping through his fingers. He knew the calf wouldn't make it. It wasn't just the drought or the bad prices. It was the cruel hand of nature that had decided this was the end. The calf, fragile and frail, took its last breath in the soft morning light. John knelt down beside the animal, his hand resting gently on the calf's still form. He didn't cry. Ranchers were supposed to be tough, to handle loss with stoicism. But in that moment, John couldn't help but feel a deep, aching emptiness. This loss, more than any before it, cut deep. He'd been through hard times before, but this one felt different. The land was drying up, the prices were falling, and now even his cattle couldn't survive. His future, his family's future, all seemed uncertain. Can a lost animal mend a broken heart? See how one rancher found hope amidst tragedy in the arms of a rescued creature. The next few days passed in a blur. John went through the motions, feeding the cattle, checking the fences, and trying to keep things together, but nothing seemed to matter anymore. The ranch felt quieter somehow, as if the land itself had fallen silent, mourning the loss of the calf. But then, as if by some twist of fate, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, as John was walking along the edge of the creek, he heard a faint, pitiful sound. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but the sound came again, a cry, weak, desperate. John followed the sound, his boots crunching on the dry ground, until he came upon a small fox cub, no more than a few weeks old. Its fur was matted with dirt, and it was clearly injured, its small body trembling in the heat. John stopped in his tracks. He didn't know much about wild animals, especially foxes, but he knew one thing. This little creature was struggling. Its mother was nowhere to be seen, and the tiny cub was barely able to stand. John hesitated. He had never been one to interfere with the natural world, and a fox was no exception. They were wild animals, and in the harsh reality of life on a ranch, survival wasn't guaranteed for any of them. He crouched down slowly, his weathered hands reaching out. The cub, weak and frightened, didn't fight him. It simply looked up at him with those large, sorrowful eyes. John sighed, the weight of his decision heavy in his chest. He had no business taking in a wild animal, especially one so young. But there was something about the cub, something that spoke to him, that reminded him of the calf he had just lost. He couldn't let this tiny creature suffer. So he picked the cub up gently, cradling it in his arms. It was lighter than he expected, fragile like a newborn. John's mind raced as he thought about what to do next. The ranch had always been about cattle, land, and crops, not wild animals. But he couldn't leave the cub to die. John carefully brought the fox cub back to his cabin, where he tended to its wounds. He fed it milk and made sure it had water. Over the next few days, the cub began to recover. Its eyes brightened and it grew stronger. Every day, John found himself spending more time with the cub. He named it Rusty for the color of its fur and the way it reminded him of the rust-colored soil of his land. What started as a simple act of kindness turned into something far more profound. The cub began to bring life back to the ranch in ways John had never expected. The harshness of life on the ranch was still there, the drought, the financial strain, the uncertainties of the future. But for the first time in a long time, John felt a glimmer of hope. Rusty had become more than just a pet. It had become a reminder of resilience, of life's ability to persevere even in the face of adversity. As the weeks passed, John found himself adapting to new practices on the ranch. He started to focus on sustainable farming, experimenting with ways to keep the land alive in a changing climate. He found new markets for his cattle, trying to diversify and ensure that he didn't rely on just one source of income. It wasn't easy, but he was determined. Rusty had shown him that sometimes the smallest things could spark the greatest change. By the time winter came, John's spirit had been renewed. The fox cub, once abandoned and helpless, was now healthy and strong. And John felt a similar strength growing within himself. They had both come through their hardships, and together they were thriving. In the end, John knew that the land would always have its challenges. But he also knew that, sometimes, hope could come from the most unexpected places. Rusty, the little fox cub, had become his companion, his symbol of resilience, a living testament to the power of compassion and the enduring strength of the human-animal bond.